All right. Good afternoon again, everybody. Today's session is going to focus on reports specifically and the difference between the two main type of reports that you can pull up. I know that it causes a lot of confusion initially. Once you get a hang of it, you know where to go for what type of information. So I prepared this little handout that I'm going to be following and reading through. I'll be emailing you that along with the link to the recording. And as you know, there's two types of reports or two tabs where you can access reports on your teacher's site. And those are the first two tabs on your menu. The first one is the progress monitoring, and the second one is just called reports. I'm actually going to start with that one, with the second tab, with the one that is called reports. And that one is based on usage and activity. The reason why I usually focus on that one first is because if I just pull up the progress first, and I pull up my class, let's say, and I see that my students are not making progress, I'm going to be alarmed. Why are they not making progress, right? But if I see the usage reports and I notice that my students are not using the program as much as I was expecting them to, or they are using the program, but their scores are not good, then that makes sense that those type of students would not be showing progress. Therefore, I usually look at the usage reports first, see what the status is there. Are the students using the program? If they're using it, are they getting good scores? Are they mastering lessons? If the answers to those questions are yes, then I am expecting to see progress for those students. If the answer to any of those questions is no, no usage, no good scores, no mastery, then I will expect to not see progress for those students. That's why those reports are just fundamentally different. One focuses on activity, the good and the bad, and the other one focuses on progress. Progress is only positive tendencies, good scores, me mastering lessons, me moving from one level to the next, from one module to the next. So if a student is getting all bad scores, we're not going to consider that progress. We're not going to bump them up a level or bump them up a module if they're getting bad scores. So that's the main difference between the two types of reports. And like I said, I'm going to start with the usage. So here I made a list of the type of data that you can get from these usage reports. You can generate this, and yes, Amber, you can, just for those that join later, you will be getting a recording of the webinar and also the handout that I'm reading off of. So you'll have both things to kind of reference. So the usage reports, you can pull up for a class or for an individual student. If you have admin permits, which I see some people here do, you'll also be able to pull up the school level of report. The information is going to be pretty similar, so I'm just focusing on the types of reports that any teacher with an account can generate, and those are going to be the class/group reports or the individual student report. Each of those, or either of those, will show you data, the data that I've listed there, between or from a specific range of dates. That's also very important because I know that that causes confusion when teachers go to generate those reports. Sometimes you just click on the report, click on your class, and just generate the report right away without adjusting the dates that that report will include. So if you don't change the dates, you might just be looking at one day, and obviously you're not going to have as much data in one day as opposed to 1 week or 1 month. So whatever range of dates that you choose to look at, and you can choose whatever range of dates, make sure that you're selecting that range of dates before generating the report. And then once the report is generated, these are the types of data points that you'll be able to pull up from it. Remember, this is the usage and activity reports. So the first column that I listed here is the type of information. Second column is what type of information will be shown for your class. And the third column is what type of information will be shown on the individual student's report. So the first data point has to do with usage. Usage as in time that the students are in the program. For the class, you'll see overall usage by student, but the average of all the programs, the time that they spend on all the programs combined. And then if you go to the individual report, you'll be able to see how that usage is divided into specific programs or specific sections. Side note about the time tracking. And you guys are probably aware of this if you've been pulling up reports. Depending on the device that the students are using, depending on certain user behaviors, the time tracker might be affected in either exaggerating the time or not reporting all the time that you're expecting to see. There's certain things like making sure that when you log in or that when the student logs in, they can see their name on the screen, or properly logging out after each session. Those type of things are always going to help the time tracker or the time tracking function be a lot more accurate. But also things like clicking out of the tab, of the Max Scholar tab, will make the time tracker stop. Things like just staring at the screen for too long and not interacting with the screen, meaning clicking on something, highlighting something, might also make the time tracker function stop. So that might make the time slower. If your students don't properly log out of their accounts, depending on the device that they have, it might not stop counting the time. So you might see exaggerated times. So we are working on really finalizing the time tracking function so that it overcomes all these little possible issues that might come along the way. But on your end and on your students' end, to make sure that we're doing all that we can on a user or from a user's perspective, make sure that when they log in, they see their name, and make sure that when they're done for the day, that they log out. And that's going to save us a lot of what ifs when it comes to the time tracker. But back to my table. In general, what you'll see is within that range of dates that you choose, for your class, you're going to see the overall usage, and for individual students, you'll see the usage on each program. Then we have the average scores. The average scores that you'll see on the class reports are going to be for all of the completed exercises on any of the programs that the students have access to. And for the individual level of report, you're going to see the same thing. All the completed exercises on any of the programs that the student is using. Emphasis on the completed. Only finished exercises will be taken into account for the scores. Then we'll see the performance. The performance can be excellent, satisfactory, or not satisfactory. I'm going to show you samples of all of these things. I just wanted to first list all the things that we're about to access on the report. So the performance can be excellent, satisfactory, or not satisfactory. On the class level, you'll see the overall performance per student in the entire program. And then when you get to the individual level of the report, you'll be able to see the performance on each program. So the performance for phonics, the performance for reading, the performance for Max Voices. Then we have the placement test results. On the class level, you're going to see the list of your students and where each of them were assigned, just where they ended up being assigned. And then when you get to the student's individual report, you'll be able to see the details of each of the tests that the students took. So you'll be able to see if they were assigned to, let's say, second grade reading level, how did they end up being assigned there? What happened during the test? So as you can see, the class report is just a lot more general overview, average, and the individual report is a lot more detailed. So if we keep moving down the list, we have the Max Phonics scores. For the class, we're going to see the overall letters and sounds that the students have mastered. When we get to the individual level, we're going to see which specific letters and sounds the students mastered and what skills within them they mastered or not, how many attempts it took them to master those things. when it comes to max reading. On the class level, we're going to see things like how many chapters have been started versus how many have been finished. And then when we get to the individual report, we'll see the list of those chapters that were finished, what scores were achieved on each of them, and if the students are writing summaries or outlines, we'll see those there as well. Then we get to max words. On the class level, we'll see, again, the average of the scores in all modules. As you know, in max words, there's 8 different modules. So the average will be one number for all of the 8 possible modules that your students are working on. But then when you get to the individual level, you'll see on each module which sections they're working on. And I see a question on the chat box. I'll reply to it in a second. And then the last thing that I listed here is the other programs, the extra programs, the ones that are at the bottom of the student screen. That is Max Music, Max Places, Max Bios, and Max Vocab. For all of those, you'll see the same type of information, whether you're on the class level or the individual level, and that's just going to be the average scores that the students get on the exercises that they finish. So I see a question here. When pulling a report for only one day's work, is the average score for that one day or overall work completed? So when you pull up a report for one day, all of the data shown is within that one day that you choose. So it is overall work completed, but it's just things that were finished within that day that you're pulling. So now let's see what these type of reports are going to look like. I took screenshots so that I didn't have to pull up real students' information. These are real reports. I just crossed off the students' names. So let's see how we get to the usage reports. So this is a screenshot that you're probably familiar with, the teacher site. In order to generate a usage report, remember I said that I was going to start with the second tab in the menu, which is reports. Once you click on that, you'll be able to select a class/group. Your school will populate automatically. If you have district admin permits, then you will be able to select a different school from that drop-down menu. Yes, I'll be sharing the screenshots as well. And then you'll select your class or group. As you know, most teachers, I would say, have one class assigned to them, but I know that there's a lot of teachers as well that have multiple classes or groups to their name. So if there were more than one, they could select whichever they want to focus on from that drop-down menu. And then here are the famous dates that I keep saying. The date on the left is when the report will start bringing over information. The date on the right is when the report will stop bringing over information. So these screenshots that I'm about to show are from January 1st until May 4th this year. So once you have your school, your class, and the dates, you would click Generate Report, and this is what you get. That big pink kind of rectangle that you see is where the students' names are. I just crossed them off, but each row is a different student. So things that I can see here, for example, obviously it's all the things that I listed on the previous slide, but you can also see how many students are active. And this is, again, within that range of dates. And then the active means that the students have not only been in the program, but also gotten past the placement test. If I say this another way, students who are still on the placement test will not be considered active students. I become active when I finish my placement test and when I actually access Max Phonics or Max Reading, an actual lesson. That's what makes a student active. Then we'll see, like I said, the first column is just the students' names that I crossed off. And then I'll go through the other columns. The first one that I'm pointing out here is the total time that each of those students has spent in the program between January 1st and May 4th. Remember, you can choose whatever range of dates. So that shows me how much time each of them have logged in overall. Then I see the Max Phonics mastered exercises, that's going to be a number. That number represents the individual letters or sounds that the students have not only gone through, but have been tested on and have mastered those tests. So when I see 7 here, that means that the student mastered 7 quizzes for 7 different letters or sounds. The next student down has mastered 24 individual letters and sounds. From this view, I cannot tell what sounds those are, what letters those are. I just know that the student is making progress because they're mastering this many quizzes. And students that have a dash on any particular column, it means one of 2 things. Option 1, they're not using that program. Option 2, they're using that program, but they're not mastering or finishing exercises in it, so we don't have a score. Remember I said that only completed exercises are taken into account. That might explain, I know that some teachers sometimes find a student that has 4 hours of use and no scores anywhere. That's probably because they're not finishing exercises. So we have the partial data saved on our back end, but until the lessons are finished and the student gets a score, that score will not be translated here. So a dash usually means unfinished exercises or that the student is just simply not working on that program. Then the following columns that have the arrows now are all the other programs that the students might access. And the reason why I bundle them all together is because for all of those, what you'll see is not a number, but a percentage. So that percentage comes from taking into account all of the individual chapters, all of the individual sections that the students have finished on each of those programs, Max Reading, Max Words, Max Bios, and taking all of those lessons and their scores into account. And the numbers that we see is the final average that we come up with. So again, this is from all of the sections that they finish on that particular program. And then the last column here shows me the performance. I mentioned that it can be excellent, not satisfactory, or satisfactory. Right there at the bottom right, I put the range that would determine if it's excellent, satisfactory, or not satisfactory. And keep in mind that for the performance, only scores that have a percentage are taken into account. Meaning, the phonics scores are not taken into account for the performance. Everything else is. So for everything that gives me a score in a percentage format, if my scores are above 80%, my performance will be excellent. If my scores are between 60 and 79%, my performance will be satisfactory. And if my scores are below that 60% line, it's going to be not satisfactory. So that's a general first view from my usage report for my class. Now, if we scroll down past that initial table, we'll see this. Here at the very top section, you'll see the average. So this would be right at the bottom of those rows that we were just looking at. And this gives me the class average. Average use, average mastered sounds and phonics, average max reading scores, average max word score for the entire class. And then down here is where I'll see the result of the placement test. This is where I'll see where each of my students, once again, that rectangle is blocking the students' names, but I'll see where each of those students were placed after they took the phonics placement and where each of them were assigned after they finished the max reading placement. For those students that I see a dash, the students either didn't take the placement test or have not finished it. If they finished it, the results will be there. Once again, from here, I can just see where they were assigned. I cannot see the details of how they all ended up being on the alphabet or how they all ended up being on level 0. If I wanted to see how they ended up there, I would need to go into their individual reports to see a little more detailed information. But for now, let's pretend that I'm still in the class report. I scrolled back up to that initial table that we were looking at, and I wanted to point your attention to this button that is on the top right-hand section that says View Detailed Reports. That is going to take me to a little bit more details, but still to my class view, my class report. And when you click on that view detailed reports, you switch over to this kind of view where you can choose to focus on a specific program. For example, on Max Reading, and then you can see a little more. You can see the usage in Max Reading specifically for each of the students in your class. You can see where they started, what level they started on, and what level they're currently working on. You can see how many chapters they've started versus how many chapters they've completed. Remember, we only give them credit for the chapters that they've completed. Those are the only ones that are giving them a score. Those are the only ones that we can report here. So when you have a student that started 47 and finished 45, that's fine. A student that started 71 and finished 69, that's fine. But when you get to a student that started 44 and only finished 18, that's when I start having an issue. The student keeps opening things and not finishing them. So all the data that I can gather is just based on those 18 exercises. So on Max Reading specifically, the students do have the option to, if they don't like a chapter, they can choose another one within their level. But it is important to, keep an eye on this type of view, see that those numbers are not very different. Up to 5 chapters that are opened and not finished, I would say are fine. Even up to 10, maybe, depending on how many are actually being finished. But you definitely want to keep that correlation close, that they're finishing almost as many as they're starting. Now, let's talk about the usage report, but for an individual student. And before I show you how you can generate it, just know that if you're on the class report that we were looking at here, on any of the screens that I've shown, and you click on each of the students' names, you would get to their individual report as well. So you can get to the individual report by clicking on their name from the class report or by doing the following. Here, I would click on reports once again, same type of report that I was looking at, but this time I'm going to a different level, and that's the student's individual report. Remember that your school name will automatically load. If you have access to more than one school, you can choose a school from the drop-down menu. And then what you'll see is the list of students that you have access to. When you click on one of their names, you select the range of dates that you want the report to pull up, and then you generate the report. So initially, we have similar information to the one that we were looking at on the class level, but this time, obviously, it's just focused on this particular student. So we can see things like when was the student's last login date, which is useful now that many districts are doing remote learning. You'll be able to see when they actually logged in for the last time. And we can see, just like we were looking at before, the scores for each individual program. But here I also have the usage on each individual program. So this student evidently is spending most of his time on Max Reading. And then I'll see also the performance for each individual program. Notice that the phonics doesn't have a performance. Remember I said that we don't have a performance for the phonics, just for things that give me a score in a percentage form. And then at the end, we'll see the overall usage, overall average scores, and overall performance of this particular student. Then if we scroll down, we see the results of the placement test. But remember I said that on the individual level, we'll be able to see a lot more details. So we can see the reading placements, where they started, where they ended up being assigned. And we can actually access the show details button. Same thing with Max Phonics. I can see that the student mastered 18 letters or sounds on the placement test, meaning that he answered questions for 18 sounds correctly, and he failed 8 letters or sounds. If I click on the show details button, this is what I would see. On the top are the 18 letters that the student answered correctly, and listed here are the 8 letters that the student made mistakes on. So remember that the placement test is divided into sections, first the alphabet, then the blends, then the digraphs. If they do well on each of those sections, they advance to the next. But if they make too many mistakes, 8 mistakes is too many, on any particular section, the test will stop and assign them to that module. Since the student, this particular one, made too many mistakes on the alphabet, on the consonants and vowels, the test stopped and assigned them to the alphabet module. You'll see some students that advance to the blends, you'll see some students that advance to the digraphs, and you'll see some students that test out of the phonics and are assigned to max words. So back to the individual's usage report. I also have that button on the top right that says view detailed reports. And that's where I'll be able to get the most detailed type of information. That's where I'll be able to see pretty much every click that the student has done. So if I click on that, I can focus on an individual program like I could before. And if actually I'm going to focus on max reading first, but little circle was placed on the wrong program. I'm focusing on max reading. And this is the type of information that I would see for this individual student. So the list of chapters that we're seeing here are the list of chapters that the student has finished. That is where the scores are coming from. That's where his average and his performance is coming from. And I can see different things for each of those chapters. Here, if we just focus on one, this is a list of things that we're seeing. The name of the chapter, the name of the book, the level that it's on max reading, the highlighting score, if they're highlighting. If you have turned off the highlighting, then it's going to be a dash. The comprehension score. Then we have different activities like the highlighting, outlines, and summaries. Each of those, if the students complete them, the system will kind of take a picture of it and save it for you here. So if you see an orange button, you can click on it and see the picture of the student's work. If the button is gray, like on the outline and the summary here, that means that the student did not do that exercise. Remember, those are not mandatory, so the students can skip them. But if they do the highlighting, the picture of the highlighting will be there. You'll be able to see how many attempts they've done at this reading chapter, how many times they've done it over again, and when did they finally finish it, or when was the last time that they went over it. Here, notice something important that's going to be relevant for the progress reports that are coming up next. On each of the reading chapters, let me actually go back a couple of steps here. Okay, so you see the names of the chapters that they read. You see the names of the books. Next to the name of each book, or at the end of the name of each book, there's a number in parentheses. So when it comes to the reading, and again, it's going to make a little bit more sense when we go over the progress reports. But when it comes to the reading, in order for us to determine progress, not just usage, because here there's good scores and there's bad scores mixed up. But remember, I said that for progress, we need good scores. So in order for the reading to determine that a student is showing progress or demonstrating growth, we take into account the chapters that they get good scores on. Good scores mean that they get an average of 75% or higher. If they get a 75% or higher, that particular chapter will give them progress points. The number that appears in parentheses on the book's name is the amount of progress points that that chapter is getting. So this first chapter on the list, I see 87% and 100%. If I average those two together, it's going to be above the 75% line. So the student will get progress points for this. I'm going to get 3 progress points. That's the number in parentheses. The next chapter down, the average is also going to be above 75%. I'm going to get another 3 points. So I have 6 progress points. The third chapter on the list, also good score. So are the following 3. Each of those gives me 5 progress points. So all of those points keep adding up and adding up and adding up. Then when we get to scores that are low, I'll see the activity here, I'll see the student's work here, but the student won't get the progress points that that chapter could have given. So they only get progress points for chapters that they finish with a 75% score or higher. And again, it's going to make more sense when we go over the progress. I just wanted to explain what that number in parentheses represents. So if we scroll down, has the list of chapters. We'll see what type of questions the students get right on the multiple choice reading comprehension portion. And then if we scroll back up, we're still on the detailed view, but this time we focus on Max Phonics. We'll see this type of table. By default, you're going to be taken to the module that your student is currently working on. Remember, this is an individual student. So this student is working on the digraphs. And then you'll see what letters and sounds they've gone over, or they're going to go over. They're listed in the order that they appear in the program. Then you'll see the pictures of the letter tracing screens. If they trace on those screens, remember, it's not mandatory for them to do so, but if they trace on the screen, you'll see a picture of it here. And then all of these columns represent the result of the letter quiz. Remember, the letter quiz comes in between one letter and the next. So in the phonics, I go through visual, tactile, and auditory set of drills for the SH, let's say. And then after it, I have a quiz. That quiz has 4 questions. Those 4 questions are each of those 4 columns that I see there. And the check marks represent that I got that question right. I've mastered that skill for that letter. And the number next to that check mark represents the amount of attempts that it took me to master that. So for the most part, the student got everything right on the first go. But then when it came to the CH and the phoneme recognition, the student had to go over it twice before getting it right. At the end, you'll see whether the students have mastered those letters or not. Remember, on the phonics, we're looking for mastery, and mastery is 100%. So I was mentioning that on the reading, a good score is 75% or higher. That's how I get credit. That's how I get progress. That's how I demonstrate growth. When it comes to the phonics, I need 100% on individual letters. So every letter, or every sound in this case, that I master gives me an additional point. So we have a system of progress points. When it comes to the phonics, the points are the individual letters and sounds that I've mastered. When it comes to the reading, it's the amount of progress points that I get for every chapter that I finish. Now here at the bottom of the screen, we'll see the results of the master quiz. That's the one that comes after an entire group of letters or sounds have been completed. And then that little text box on the bottom right corner is where you can manually enter the fluency score that you give your students. Remember, they have a fluency screen on the program. They just reading for practice. The computer is not recording them, but you should monitor and assess them on the fluency drills once a week, once every 2 weeks. It's what we suggest. And you can enter the scores there so you can keep it all together with their phonics scores and their phonics results. So having said that about the usage report, now let's move over to the progress monitoring. This is the one that you're probably really interested in. This is the one that usually teachers go right into, but remember I said there's a reason why I pull up the usage first, because if I just pull up the progress and I see no progress, I'm gonna be very alarmed. But if I actually pull up the usage first and see that my students are not quite there yet, that they're getting 65% scores, 70% scores, I'll see that they're almost there. So it'll make a little more sense. So now that we went over the usage, now let's talk about the progress. So this type of report can also be generated for a class or for an individual. And it'll show you data from the beginning of the school year until the present day that you pull up that report. And here you don't have to choose a frame of dates. It's automatically updated to the latest date in real time, pretty much, and since the beginning of the school year. So what you can choose in this case for the progress monitoring is what section you want to focus on, reading or phonics. On the reading, I listed there the types of things that you'll see, how many students are on, above, or below grade level, how many students have demonstrated progress. Remember, progress on the reading is individual chapters that I've finished with a good score. I'll see how many progress points I've gotten throughout the year, since the beginning of the school year until the present day. And between those points in time, there will be different marking periods. Right now, we have the placement test or the beginning of the school year. October 15th is the first marking period, and then we have the current score. I think the next marking period is going to be December 15th. So when that date passes, we're going to see the initial score, October 15th score, December 15th score, and the current score. So those marking periods will be added up as the dates pass. And it's going to be every 9 days, I believe. Another thing that you can see on the reading report is the recommended areas for teacher intervention. So we take into account the student's activity, what exercises they do good, which ones they do not, what type of questions they get right, what type of questions they get wrong. And then we group the students together for you to show you who struggles with what. And that'll give you a little bit of guidance as to which areas you might want to focus on your direct instruction, which areas maybe they need a little more reinforcement on top of what the software is giving them. So maybe you want to come up with some worksheet or look up something else that you can work on those skills with your students. And then when it comes to the phonics progress, we'll see how many students are demonstrating progress. Remember, progress in the phonics is the amount of letters that I've mastered completely, gotten 100% on. How many mastered letters or sounds I have on each individual module, the tendencies of correct versus incorrect answers per skill. So we were mentioning a second ago the 4 skills that the students are tested on each letter quiz. And we saw all those check marks and the numbers of how many attempts it took them to master those things. But when it comes to the progress, we won't see every single click. We won't see every single attempt. We'll see tendencies of what they are doing lately. Lately, meaning the 5 latest answers that they've given for the letter recognition, the 5 latest answers that they've given for the phonemic awareness. If out of those 5, the student tends to get that question right, I'll see a check mark. The tendency is that the student gets it right. If out of those 5, the student usually gets that question wrong, I'll see an X. The tendency is that the student struggles with that type of question. And then you'll see also the recommended areas of teacher intervention, which will come from the same thing. We'll see what type of questions the students get right or wrong, usually, and group the students for you based on the skills that they struggle with. So let's see how to generate those, what they look like. These are, once again, the progress reports. That's going to be the first option on the menu. We're going to focus on the class first. The individual one shows you the same type of information, only one student at a time. So I'm just showing you screenshots of the class report, the class progress report. Here, remember, the school will populate automatically, or you'll choose from the options that you have. You'll choose the class that you want to focus on, and then you'll select which program you want to focus on, the reading or the phonics. Here, I chose the reading first. And here is where we start seeing those percentages that I was talking about. How many students are working below, above, or on grade level? How many students have demonstrated progress or not? Remember, on the reading, progress is demonstrated by finishing chapters with a score of 75% or higher. And then we'll see that table with levels on the top. The ones that we're really interested on are the Lexile and the grade level. The Lexile is going to be the progress points, and the grade level is going to be the max reading level. For every grade level, or for every max reading level, there's an equivalent Lexile point base or progress point base. Level 0 is equivalent to 0 points. Level 1 is equivalent to 200 points. Level 2 is equivalent to 300 points, and so on. If the students are on higher grades, then we'll see the numbers go up. But what's important to know here is that I start on a level based on either my placement test or based on the progress that I had from last school year. And I have my progress points that either my placement test or my progress have, or I've brought along with me based on my progress. From that point on, every chapter that I finish with a good score gives me more points. Like I was showing before, some give me 3 points, some give me 5 points. And then I keep adding up to my progress. As soon as I hit the amount of points that the next level requires, I'll unlock the next level. So for example, this first student on the list, you can see that it's quite close to the 500, quite close to level 3. So when the student hits 500 points, he'll unlock level 3. That's how the students move through the levels automatically. You can always move the levels up or down manually, but the students can also unlock their way through the levels. How? With their progress points. So for each student, we'll see this little colorful bar, that's the progress bar. And right below it, we'll see the progress points at different points in time. Remember, this report or the screenshots I actually took back in May. So this would be for the entire school year, last school year. Right now, we're going to see less dates, probably less points as well, because we were just starting or we're 2 months into it at most. So if we focus on one of those, before we focus on one of those specific students, when you just pull up the report, this is what you see. The students, their progress bars, their progress points. And at the very bottom of that report is where you'll see the recommended areas of teacher intervention. So everything that is crossed off with that pink line are students' names. Students who struggle with figurative language. If you have students that struggle with handwriting, you'll have a group under that. If you have students that struggle with inferences, you'll have the title inferences and some students under that. And then now if we focus on a particular student, we'll see their initial score. If the initial score is not rounded, meaning 0, 200, 300, 500, it's because the student was using Max Color last year, and the initial score is the scores that they brought along with them, their progress that they brought along with them from last school year. And then we'll see at different marking periods, like I mentioned, the scores that they've achieved up until those different points, and the current score will be the score of today. So let's kind of read into this. The student started off with 235 points. That represents the orange portion of that progress bar that is somewhere in between level 1. I know that because level 1 starts with 200 points, level 2 starts with 300 points, so I know that he's somewhere there in the middle. By August 15th, nothing changed, so there's nothing in the bar to account for that. By November 15th, the student had 308 points. That's the teal part of that bar. And I noticed that 308 is already in level 2 territory, because level 2 starts with 300 points. So the student is 8 points into level 2. He's working on 2nd grade reading level. Notice that under the 2, there's like a green background. That's because that's the student's grade. So automatically the system will put a green background on the student's grade. That is the goal. We want them to at least be reading on grade level. So this student already achieved their goal by November 15th. And then they kept working. And then they kept finishing chapters, some with good scores, some with bad scores. Those that the student finished with good scores gave him progress points. So by February 15th, remember, this is from last school year, by February 15th, they got 445 points. That's still within level 2. And then currently, they have 513 points. That's within level 3 territory. So I know that the student is not working above grade level. They achieved their goal, they passed it, and now they're working on 3rd grade reading level. Like I said, on August 15th, nothing changed. So I don't see anything, any difference in the points and nothing in the bar to show for it. So this is kind of the progress that we would expect to see from a student. At least 1 grade level of improvement. Ideally, 1.5 to 2. So now let's focus on the progress reports, but for phonics. You'll see on the top of the screen, towards the top of the screen, you can focus on a specific module. You'll see how many of your students are on each of them. The percentage of how many of them have made progress. Remember, progress in Max Phonics is mastery. So students that have not achieved 100% in their individual lessons or letters or sounds that they go through are part of the percentage that are not making progress. And then we'll see, like I mentioned, the 4 skills that the students are asked about or assessed on the letter quest, and tendencies. So you see the check marks or an X, but without a number next to it. Remember here, it's not every single attempt that the student has done, it's the latest tendencies. Out of the 5 latest answers that the student has given for this particular skill, they usually get it right, that will be a check mark. If they usually get it wrong, that would be an X. And then we'll see a progress bar, just like we were looking at on the reading, and a progress point line that gives me their points at different dates throughout the school year. So this will be a class progress report for phonics. Students listed, each of them with their progress bar, each of them with their points, and each of them with the tendencies of what they tend to get right or wrong. At the end of that report, you would see the students grouped by the skill that they struggle with. And do I have another one? No, let me just focus on here, this one. So you'll see a student, let's focus on the 3rd one on the list here. The student has an initial score of 18. 18 letters or sounds that the student knew on the placement test or that the student had mastered previous school year. And then we'll see at different points in time how many additional sounds they've mastered. When it comes to the alphabet, the maximum amount of points that I'll see is 26 because there's 26 letters in the alphabet. And remember I said, when it comes to the phonics, the points, it's just the individual letters or sounds that I mastered. So the alphabet will be a maximum of 26. The blends is actually also a maximum of 26 points. And the digress, the maximum is 14. I'll repeat that. Alphabet is 26, blends is 26, and digress is 14. So you'll see that all of the students, most of the students in this class already mastered the alphabet, some at different points in time. Some started knowing more letters than others, and one of them is still working on it. It's kind of halfway through. Remember, each of the students have their individual accounts. They each master things at their own time. But the fact that you have the recommended areas of teacher intervention, like I said, will guide you a little bit into what sections you should focus a little more attention on. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show you today as a kind of quick, oh, that's my baby, as a kind of quick summary. The main difference between the usage report and the progress report is that usage will show me everything that the student did within a specific frame or range of dates. The good and the bad, good scores and bad scores, struggle and success. Where the progress monitoring will only show me progress from the beginning of the school year up until today. And progress is measured by either mastering things along the way or getting good scores along the way. So if my student is using the program but getting low scores, if my student is using the program but not finishing exercises, not mastering sounds, I'm not going to see the progress coming. So at this point, we have a few minutes left from the scheduled time that I had. I'm going to open the floor to questions. I'm going to stop the recording. So let me know if there's anything that I can answer for you that wasn't clear from what I've shown.